Hello, and welcome to This Is Your Mind, Applied Neuroscience for Well-Being. My name is Anne Marie Rossi, and I will be your host. Today we're going to learn a bit about how the brain processes information. I want to be clear that the brain is an immensely complex organ, and this is merely an introduction. It is in no way a complete representation of the structure and function of the brain. It is, as the title says, an introduction. We're going to discuss 5 areas of the brain: how we process positive and negative stimulus, the effects of prolonged activation of our stress response, and introduce our first neurorestorative exercise. Let's begin. The thalamus is the sensory relay station. It is responsible for the initial processing of our senses, excluding smell. The amygdala is the gatekeeper, or alarm center. It determines if the senses processed by the thalamus are safe or a threat. Our hypothalamus is the command center of our endocrine and autonomic nervous system. It's also responsible for homeostasis. The hippocampus is where we regulate our emotions, store and process memories, and releases a low-level signal connecting the whole brain. Interestingly, malformations and dysfunction of this brain region have been seen in multiple mental illnesses, including bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, personality disorders, ADD and ADHD, as well as PTSD, demonstrating that many mental illnesses are in fact neurological disorders. Lastly, the prefrontal cortex. This is where all the best ideas you, or anyone in the history of the world has ever had, comes from. It's where reason and logic and creativity take place, as well as empathy and compassion. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to engage in higher level processing. In fact, our brain uses 25% of our body's energy, despite it being only 2% of our body. Let's put this all together and walk through how we process positive stimulus. Let's say you're walking and you encounter a beautiful beach, or your child reaches out to hold your hand, or a puppy comes running up to you at the park. If you are like me, these stimuli are positive. First, the thalamus will recognize this sight, sound, or touch. It will then move this information to our amygdala. The amygdala determines that this is not a threat and lets the hypothalamus know that we can activate our parasympathetic nervous system and open up pathways to our hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. From the time we encounter this positive stimulus to our response is approximately 500 milliseconds, or half a second. When we encounter positive stimulus, our hypothalamus recognizes this and it engages our parasympathetic nervous system. This is the calming part of our nervous system and is sometimes referred to as the rest and digest system. Now let's talk about what happens when we encounter negative stimuli. In this case, we see real danger in front of us. We've encountered a dangerous animal. We're fighting in a war. Our house is on fire. I want to take a moment here to be sure that I have your attention. What I'm about to say is of paramount importance. Your brain cannot tell the difference between this type of real danger and perceived danger. It thinks that you encountering a poisonous snake is equivalent to being afraid of public speaking, or being worried about failing a test is the same as being in a war. It sees your house on fire and your mother-in-law moving in as equal threats to your safety and well-being. How does the brain process real or perceived negative stimulus? First, again, it starts with the thalamus. What it sees, touches, tastes, or hears initially engages the thalamus. This information is then sent to the amygdala, the gatekeeper, where the amygdala determines that this is in fact a threat and activates what we call amygdala hijack. This hijack disrupts the connections to our hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, activating our fight, flight, or freeze response, in 14 milliseconds. How absolutely amazing is the processing speed of the human brain. When our amygdala alarm has been sounded, it sends signals to the hypothalamus to activate the sympathetic nervous system. This is known as our fight or flight response. This activation directs energy away from higher level cognitive processes and to our limbs so that we can more quickly and efficiently and effectively fight off an intruder or run from a snake. Have you ever studied for a test? I mean, really studied. And when you sat down, poof, all of it was gone. But after the test was over and you were relaxed, you remembered all the answers. Have you ever thought of the world's greatest comeback? 10 minutes later? Has someone ever told you to calm down and you only became more enraged? The reason you couldn't remember the answers or creatively respond to a conversation or calm down was because of this process. Your hippocampus and prefrontal cortex were offline when your amygdala sounded the alarm and your sympathetic nervous system had been activated. Whether you agree to it, like it, or in any way think you choose it is 100% irrelevant. This process happens automatically without thought. It's instinctual. We can't prevent this process from happening. This activation is not as simple as the diagram would lead you to believe. For example, memories stored in the hippocampus can trigger an amygdala hijack, as seen in individuals with post-traumatic stress disorder. You can literally think yourself into an amygdala hijack through accessing past memories or catastrophizing potential negative future outcomes. And stimuli that may be considered positive or non-threatening can sometimes trigger a sympathetic nervous system activation, as seen in individuals in a manic state who have bipolar disorder. The brain is highly complex, communicating across a variety of brain regions. This video is meant as a simple introduction into how the brain generally processes internal and external stimuli. When our sympathetic nervous system has been activated, we can see this in a number of ways. Maybe we have a hard time focusing or concentrating. We might have dry mouth, like we're sucking on cotton balls. Maybe we have difficulty breathing and it feels like an elephant is sitting on our chests. Our heart rate can accelerate and we can feel dizzy or lightheaded. We might feel hot, begin to sweat, and or blush. We may feel sick to our stomachs, or our muscles may feel tight and tense. Because our brain can't tell the difference between real and perceived danger, things that might not seem like that big of a deal are activating our stress response all day. We wake up late, we're stressed out. We're late to work and stuck in traffic, our stress response is activated. We have internet issues, a challenging student or parent or coworker. These seemingly tiny, unimportant situations activate our sympathetic nervous system over and over and over again, putting us in a near constant state of amygdala activation. It can often feel like our brain is on fire. This constant activation of our sympathetic nervous system and the prolonged exposure to the hormone cortisol has serious long-term negative effects on our physical and mental well-being. Researchers estimate that up to 90% of illnesses are stress-related, as almost every system in the body is influenced by chronic stress. Emotional stress is a major contributing factor to the 6 leading causes of death: cancer, coronary heart disease, accidental injuries, respiratory disorders, cirrhosis of the liver, and suicide. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that stress accounts for 75% of all doctor's visits, including, but not limited to, headaches, back pain, heart problems, upset stomach, ulcers, sleep problems, tiredness, and accidents. Studies have shown that chronic stress exerts a general immunosuppressive effect. When chronic stress goes unreleased, it suppresses the body's immune system and ultimately manifests as illness. Daily stress is more damaging than a single traumatic event, as your body is never given the opportunity to rest and restore itself. And thus, this accumulation degrades your body over time, causing diseases. Over time, stress severely damages the brain, leading to shrinkage of the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, decreases the production of serotonin and dopamine, halts the production of new brain cells, and increases the activity and size of the amygdala. In a study done at MIT, researchers examined the impacts of stress on cells in the brain called neurons. We'll learn more about those next week. They compared the neurons of individuals self-reporting high levels of stress to those self-reporting normal levels of stress. As you can see, stress damages neurons, ultimately killing them, leading to an overall shrinking of brain networks and decreasing brain function. We aren't having an amygdala lobotomy, nor would we want one. Our amygdala is necessary to keep us safe. But what we can do is train ourselves to become aware of the instinctual activation of our sympathetic nervous system so that we can choose to override it if we so desire. As we discussed earlier, the thinking part of your brain, prefrontal cortex, is offline during amygdala hijack, and our energy is redirected to our physical body in order to more efficiently and effectively fight off or run from danger. We can literally feel the activation of our sympathetic nervous system in our body before our brain tells us. This is why the first neural restorative exercise we have you engage in is a body scan. We must connect ourselves to our body so that we can quickly recognize the activation of our sympathetic nervous system in order for us to be able to override it. What do you feel, and where do you feel it? My daughter gets sweaty palms. My son's heart races. I feel a sickness in my stomach, like I'm on a ride I don't want to be on and can't get off. The more in tune you become to this sensation, the more quickly you can notice that you've been triggered. And from there, you can engage in step 2, turning this response off. So let us begin with a short body scan. I would like you to please sit up straight, place your feet flat on the floor if you're seated in a chair. Let your arms hang comfortably from the shoulders. Put the hands on the knees. Close your eyes. Notice answers to these questions as they come up. What are you feeling, and where are you feeling it? Starting with your head. Is there tension in your forehead? In the eyes? Is your jaw clenched? If you notice any thoughts or emotions arise, simply notice them and return your attention to the physical sensations in your body. Now notice your neck and shoulders. Upper back. What do you feel? Down your arms to your wrists and hands. Now bring your attention to your chest. Again, what do you feel? Around to your mid and low back. Now to your stomach. What do you feel, and where do you feel it? Into your hips, down to your legs, ankles, and feet. Now bring your entire body into this view, from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. What do you feel, and where do you feel it? Gently open your eyes. This week, begin to bring awareness to your body's state throughout the day. Do you notice the sympathetic nervous system activation? If so, what's happening around you? What thoughts and feelings are you having? And what does this physical sensation feel like for you, and where do you feel it? Next week, we will begin introducing you to practices that will turn off the sympathetic nervous system and activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxed and alert state. Once you have tuned into your body and are able to recognize the sympathetic nervous system activation, remember, your body tells you before your mind tells you. Then you can engage in the neurorestorative exercises to control the stress response. You can't stop the amygdala hypothalamus activation, but you can turn it off with specific mind training exercises. For this week, keep your focus on your short body scans, getting to know your physical sensations associated with this activation. Remember, the more you do this, the easier it becomes, so be sure to practice as often as you can, checking in with how your body is feeling throughout the day. Take this opportunity to prioritize your health and well-being. Without a healthy mind, you cannot have a healthy body, and you cannot be of service to anyone around you. If you do not make time for your wellness, you will be forced to make time for your illness.